There's two new acts, the Natural Environment Act and the Planning Act. They're going to replace the Resource Management Act, the RMA, by the end of this year, with a bill introduced to Parliament in 2026 and passed before the next election. The government claims the reforms will slash compliance and admin costs by 45%. Notably, the new acts will drop the clause requiring adherence to the principles of the Treaty of Waitangi. According to the RMA Minister Chris Bishop and the Undersecretary Simon Court, the new system will be grounded in property rights and will shift the burden of proof. Development will be presumed illegal, unless it significantly harms the environment or neighbouring land use. And Simon Court joins me now. Simon, g'day, mate.
Good afternoon, Leah, and good afternoon to the platform listeners.
Nice to have you. It's been a while. Simon, the RMA attempts to balance development and environment. What is so wrong in its current state?
Well, the Resource Management Act was an ideological victory back in the late 1980s, early 90s, when people were worried about the planet and running out of resources. And its starting premise is this concept of sustainable development, which was really trendy back then. That, if only we do things in a sustainable way, then we'll preserve the planet and everybody will be able to live in a home and drive a car. Well, it turns out that, after over 30 years of trying to interpret what sustainable development means, still no one knows, and Kiwis are spending years sometimes to get consents. The Infrastructure Commission told government that it's costing about $1.3 billion a year just to get the consents, without even including the cost of complying with all the crazy conditions. And I'll just give you an example. I'm in Wellington 30 weeks a year as a Member of Parliament, but I live in Auckland. My background's a civil engineer, so I take a really close interest in what the RMA is doing to big infrastructure projects. The guys up the road in the Hutt Valley are planning to build some stop banks to keep the water out of town so they can redevelop their town centre. This is a project called Riverlink. It's been in the making for a decade. They finally got some consent conditions handed down by the Environment Court. It wasn't, here's 10 pages of things to comply with. It's go away and write 20 management plans, and then we'll tell you if you're allowed to start. And by the way, one of the management plans was when you're designing your footpaths and cycleways, you have to include on the design panel those people who are gluing their hands to the road and trying to stop the traffic. So it's just gone way past sustainable development to saying no to things, or you're only allowed to do things with a whole lot of crazy and absurd conditions. It's gone too far, and that's why Bishop and I announced on Monday that we're going to replace the Resource Management Act with two systems, one that enables housing and infrastructure development, and the other that says, look, there's important things to manage in the Natural Environment Act, but we can do that with a separate act. We don't have to conflate these two things.
Okay. So, because Simon, what I'm hearing is it's not, I know that wasn't the whole book of it, or the whole RMA is over 900 pages long. Obviously, it's quite bloated. I get that. But it's not all environment issues, is it, that stops why something doesn't go ahead? Has it got to the point where there's just too many fingers in the pie?
There's too many people able to object from far and wide. We saw that recently with a decision about the Wanaka McDonald's, that it couldn't go ahead because apparently people driving down the road into McDonald's past Mitre 10 into Wanaka might be horrified at the sight of a McDonald's in the way of their view. So it's around views, what they call outstanding natural features, which turns out if you turn around anywhere in New Zealand, it's pretty outstanding. And so if everywhere is an outstanding natural feature, where in the heck are we supposed to build things? And then you look at heritage. We had Hamilton Council recently apply what they call a character overlay to about 2,000 properties in Hamilton, what they call the railway cottages and the special era of building in New Zealand. Hundreds of those homes are Kāinga Ora houses destined for redevelopment. If you've got councils saying that Kāinga Ora houses are somehow special character, we're doomed. And the most egregious example of that this week is an 11-storey architecturally designed building on Kay Road in Auckland being turned down by the planning commissioners because it was out of character with the area. For goodness sakes, between the government and council, we're just spending $1 billion on a brand new train station, 2 minutes walk from this new building, if we can't build up and actually build stuff where we're investing in infrastructure, this country's not going to go ahead. So you're
Simon,
right, Leah.
Sorry, no, those ones that you've mentioned actually quite interest me, because obviously with this new reform, the likes of Wanaka and the likes of Hamilton and K Road that you mentioned, they would have gone ahead with the building, correct? Is that this is why you brought them up?
That's right.
Right.
In the new legislation, we want an enabling pathway for housing and infrastructure.
Because with Wanaka, like I followed that quite closely. In fact, I interviewed some of the people that didn't want it in Wanaka, including the mayor and other people. And I'll say, Simon, like what people are concerned about, and I must say with Wanaka in particular, does this mean that the people of the town just do not now have a say? Because I don't think Wanaka, personally, I don't think Wanaka needs a McDonald's. I don't think the golden arches need to be everywhere in the world. And you know, if you've got a very strong push from the community that says it just kind of goes against the ethos of what Wanaka is, and then you'll holus bolus over them and say, stuff it, we're building McDonald's. Can you see how is this what's going to happen? It doesn't matter if someone wants to save a heritage building, we're just going to ignore them.
Well, certainly no heritage building in the way of Wanaka McDonald's. It's an
No, but you were talking about Hamilton.
An industrial area.
Yeah, but Wanaka didn't want it, right, for the reasons, not just for views, because they don't have a lot of takeaways or fast food in Wanaka. They've got like a Subway and that's it. They just didn't want it to turn into another row of, you know, eventually all these takeaways. I don't think that's unfair to ask that.
Well, I'll tell you who it's unfair to. It's unfair to the person who owns the land, and in the new system will have their property rights upheld, right, so that if they want to use the land in a way that doesn't have spillover effects on their neighbours, and we're talking about the things like noise and shading and, you know, what we consider to be annoying effects from our neighbour, if they can manage those spillover effects in an acceptable way, they should be able to use their land. Other people should not be able to weigh in and say what property owners should and shouldn't be allowed to use their land for. That's why the Wanaka example is another classic case of that. It wasn't just people in the town saying, oh, I don't want to see a McDonald's, I'm happy with my local burger joint. Well, that shouldn't be up to them. We also had Health New Zealand weighing in and saying people shouldn't be able to eat this kind of food. So the entire RMA weaponises the ability of people far and wide, near and close, to object to the way people use their property. And if we allowed that to continue, in the end we'd build nothing nowhere ever. And so, look, the presumption is going to change, but what it will mean is that people can be confident that those spillover effects on amenity, like noise and traffic and shading and overlooking, all those things that, you know, if we live in a city, we want to make sure our neighbours aren't affected by what we're doing on property. Those values will be upheld in the new Development Act.
Right, I get you. So, but it's the property rights. This is what the big focus is on, property rights. So, the person that owned the land where Wanaka wanted that McDonald's could have gone on, they get the right to say it doesn't matter if there's other Tom, Dick, and Harrys that say we just don't want it for the town. The property rights go to the person who owns the land. They get the say.
That's right. And look, the same should apply to big infrastructure projects where, you know, you look at poor old New Zealand Transport Agency. I mean, there's not too many people left there who know how to build a road after 6 years of the Labour and Greens government cleaned them all out. But the ones who are trying to build a new highway called the Mount Messenger bypass around a really dangerous section of the state highway north of New Plymouth there, they've spent 6 or 7 years trying to argue about the environmental conditions in multiple courts. And of course, it turns out that, you know, you can build the road either as a bridge or as a tunnel. There's a number of different ways to do it. You can protect the environment, but you shouldn't have to argue about it over and over again through countless rounds of appeals with people who've lost in one court when the judge says we're happy that the environmental effects are managed. They find another court and another avenue to object. So it's just costing the country far too much money. Yeah. And we do want to protect the environment, and that's why the Environment Act is going to have some specific criteria around environmental limits and bottom lines to say, look, there's some places